Good evening. It's August 28th, 2025. I'm in the Pacific Heights neighborhood of San Francisco, but I'm actually in a very specific portion of Pacific Heights called Billionaires Row. I'm standing on the corner of Divisadero and Broadway, and this is where Billionaires Row starts. It occupies a 3-block area of Pacific Heights, and this is basically the richest of the rich section of Pacific Heights. Pacific Heights is wealthy, a lot of wealthy, upscale, bougie, ultra important people live here. But then when you get to Billionaires Row, which starts here and goes 3 blocks down, this is like the upper crust. So I'm just gonna do a quick little walk through this area. This is basically just a little walking tour of Billionaires Row here in Pacific Heights, San Francisco, otherwise known as the Gold Coast. It was originally called the Gold Coast, and then it became Millionaires Row. But then as things changed, the economy changed, you had more and more tech titans and finance titans come into being. This area sort of morphed into a Billionaires Row. So there you go. And I'm just a poor little guy here walking around looking at all these nice big homes, but hey, it gives me something to strive for, right? Even though I know I'll never get there. This is a nice area, you know, and there are quite a few tech moguls that live here. Some of them still live here, some of them used to live here. I know Steve Jobs' widow, Laureen Powell Jobs. She owns a home somewhere here in Billionaires Row, as does Larry Ellison, David Sachs, I believe his name, and there's several well-known people. One of the original founders of PayPal lives here, and then one of the Oracle bigwigs lives here, and then another guy affiliated with Farmville. So there's a lot of techies, a lot of finance titans. There used to be a few Getty family members that lived in this area. I don't know if they still own homes, but obviously the Gettys, I mean, that's one of the original old money families. So I wouldn't be surprised if they still have a presence in this neighborhood. But as you can see, it is a nice, beautiful neighborhood. Very unlike some of the other sections of San Francisco. You know, depending on where you are in San Francisco, you might be walking in a multi-million-dollar area with, you know, big opulent mansions, or you may be walking in a very rundown, drug-infested, littered neighborhood overrun with hypodermic needles and human feces, litter. But obviously, that's not here. And again, this 3-block area, it occupies a 3-block area between Divisadero and Lion Street here in San Francisco. And then once you get to Lion Street, they have a famous set of steps that people use to get their cardio workout in. They go up and down the steps. It's like 288 steps that comprise the Lion Street steps, and that's a famous set of steps here in Pacific Heights. But then there's a lot of other things to see here. Robin Williams, he didn't live here in Billionaires Row, but he lived pretty close. He lived in a neighborhood just west of here. He lived closer to the Presidio. He basically lived out by the Presidio, between the Presidio and the Golden Gate Bridge, basically in that area. And I think that neighborhood is called Seacliff, but it's not that far away from here. And then there's another neighborhood here called Presidio Heights, which is a nice neighborhood too. It's not quite as bougie as this neighborhood is, but it's a nice neighborhood nonetheless. And for those of you true crime aficionados, Presidio Heights was the location for one of the Zodiac killer murders. The Zodiac killer, back in the late 1960s, he actually shot and killed a cab driver in Presidio Heights, and that was over on Washington and Cherry streets in the Presidio Heights neighborhood. And let me just pan back around. Again, you know, I don't have Brenda with me this evening. She's staying at a boarder's house while I do my pet sitting and house sitting assignment here in San Francisco. So I'm just out doing my own thing. But man, look at these nice homes. Can you imagine living in a home like that? I mean, what would your day-to-day life be besides doing whatever you do to finance your lifestyle? I mean, I'm always kind of curious as to what types of lifestyles these people have. Like, do they go to the coffee shop like normal people? Do they go to Starbucks? Do they walk to local restaurants? Do they go work out in local gyms? Do they go see movies like normal people? It's kind of like, makes you wonder like what their lives are like, you know? Wealth. You can smell the wealth though. But San Francisco itself is a beautiful city, even though San Francisco gets a lot of hate, rightfully so, because a lot of the politics here might be a little bit screwy and just the way the city's run. There's a lot of improvement, but it is a nice city. It's located in a beautiful portion of California, right on the coast. The weather's beautiful. It's nice and cool. Rarely does it ever get hot. Even in the dead of summer, it's rarely does it get hot here. But it's also a very welcoming city. You know, it's very inclusive. It's very welcoming to alternative lifestyles, you know, iconoclasts, beatniks, people that don't maybe fit into more of the traditional boxes in which society likes to put people. You know, San Francisco is a very liberal, welcoming city, and that's, to me, that's a definite strong point. I always enjoy it when I'm up here. I don't even really do anything particular. I just like to get out and walk around and go explore, walk around the streets and daydream about being rich. Oh man, wouldn't it be so nice to be rich, to have FU money, the kind of money where you wouldn't have to worry about anything. You wouldn't have to worry about working, probably. You wouldn't have to worry about car repairs, paying your rent, whether or not you need dental work. No concerns. They say money doesn't buy happiness, but I would have to beg to differ, at least up to a certain point. I know it may not make you genuinely, completely happy, as in where you love yourself and you like yourself and you just feel like everything's going great, but money does alleviate a lot of these stressors that tend to chip away at a person's happiness. So call me crazy, but I wouldn't mind being rich and, you know, at least superficially happy. And here we are at the end of Billionaires Row, and this is basically where it ends. And it ends right here at the Presidio. This is an old military installation. Used to be active military, and I think it still may be, but they have a hospital here, and it used to be a much bigger part of the military operation. But this is the Presidio, at least one entrance to the Presidio. And it's a nice place to walk around. They have a lot of hiking trails in here, and it kind of snakes down. The little trail goes back into the Presidio, and this is basically it. We basically walk the entire length of Billionaires Row, and here we have one of these self-driving cars, the Waymo Jaguar. These things are all over the place. I'm going to give you an up-close and personal look at the Lion Street steps right here. Even though that wasn't the intention of this video, but this is a nice little walking spot. You go up and down this thing several times, and that's a cardio workout. 288 steps in total. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit, give you a better shot of the Marina. You're looking out over basically the Marina District, Palace of Fine Arts, Marin counties out in the distance. You have some sailboats out on the water, a speedboat, and you can't see the Golden Gate Bridge from here, but it's just to the left, just a little bit behind the trees and the shrubbery there. The Golden Gate Bridge is there to the left. And it's a nice, beautiful day. I'm gonna walk back towards the Visadero. A little more history about Pacific Heights. You know, Pacific Heights, just the regular Pacific Heights came into being like towards the late 1800s. But this particular section, this particular section called Billionaires Row, this really became popular after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. A lot of the wealthy individuals who lived, closer to downtown and closer to the water, areas that were really damaged by the earthquake and the subsequent fires, a lot of those wealthier people relocated out to this portion of Pacific Heights, in large part because the bedrock, the ground upon which this neighborhood was constructed, was and is just a lot more stable than the ground nearer the water, nearer downtown. So that was one reason that fueled the development of this particular area. But the other reason was the extension of the streetcars. Back when streetcars were much more ubiquitous, well, actually, the streetcars and the street rails, the rail lines, basically, they extended those lines further west. Initially, they were closer to downtown and, out towards the eastern section of San Francisco. But as those rail lines were extended westward, that opened up some of these additional areas for development. So that played a part in this neighborhood becoming a much bigger deal over time. I know a mansion just recently sold here for $35 million. And I read an article in the San Francisco Chronicle recently that there's a mass drive to renovate a lot of these mansions. I don't know why, but the article alluded to a lot of the mansions, just a lot of the owners, they're in some sort of a race to, I guess, renovate their mansions and maybe just to add to the curb appeal or to add to the sailing price. Maybe some of them are planning on selling their homes, so they're going to try and get the most bang for their buck. But there's a mass renovation going on supposedly here in Billionaires Row and or Pacific Heights, and you do see quite a bit of home construction going on. And one cool thing about this neighborhood is you can park here for 3 hours at a time. Most other sections of San Francisco, most of the parking regulations are for 2 hours. But here they give you 3. So there's an additional bonus to living in this neighborhood. You get an extra hour of parking before you have to move, unless you have a permit, obviously. Also, the well-known author Danielle Steele, she lives in Pacific Heights. She doesn't live here in Billionaires Row, but she lives another, maybe like a mile down the street. She lives in Pacific Heights going towards the eastern section. She lives out by Lafayette Park. And Danielle Steele, she's lived there for several years, and I don't know if I don't believe it's her primary residence. I know she has a second home in Paris, France. But she used to live primarily in San Francisco, but now I believe she just has the San Francisco home as a second home. Can you imagine coming home and walking right up those steps into that door? I mean, just imagine what would await you on the other side of that door. All the opulence, the wealth. Oh, it's nice to dream, right? I like the old school designs. These modern designs, they're nice and neat. They look really sharp and neat, but I prefer the older construction. I like the old brick homes or the homes that look more Victorian. That's just my particular taste. But if they were to give me one of these newer chic-looking homes, I for sure would not say no. But I love this brick home right here. This is beautiful. A lot of these homes have secret entrances too. Secret entrances. A lot of them have large basements. Some of them have elevators. External elevators, internal elevators. And who knows what else, man. Some of these homes are just absolutely gorgeous, and they all occupy pretty good sized lots. I also learned, unbelievably, that the majority of the people that live here are actually renters. I don't know how true the statistic is that I read earlier today, but it said something like over 70% of the people that live here are actually renting, and only about a quarter of the homes are actually owned outright. They're actually, lived in by the people that actually own the home. So I thought that was a little interesting. It has something to do with tax issues, tax breaks, trust fund issues, and basically it has to do with tax, the amount of tax that you pay, and whether you have a second home or an investment home or things like that. Mr. Waymo, I saw a Waymo car driving earlier with just a dog inside. There was no person that I could see. It was just a dog being transported. So I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, that's about the end of this video. I know I have a tendency to ramble, so I'm gonna cut this one off and just say thank you for tagging along, and I hope you enjoyed this little walk down Billionaires Row in Pacific Heights, San Francisco, California.